All right, so now let's focus on the functionality to register the user. So in this register function, this is where we're going to dwell in for now. I'll delete this console.log, and here we're going to start by validating the input field. So remember, we did some validation in the back end, but I said that it's best to have validation both in the back end and the front end. If for any reason the user is able to bypass your validation in the front end, you also want to have some validation in the back end to tell the user that, look, you need to enter the correct data. So here I'm going to start by checking if the fields are empty. So here I'll just say if there is no name, or there is no email, or there is no password in the input fields. What do I want to tell the user? Look, I want to tell the user that I want to return an error. I'm using return here because I want the process to cancel. I don't want it to go to the next line of code. So return, and then I'll just say toast.error. Come on, what's going on with this guy? Toast.error. And the error message I'll just send is all fields are required. Like so. All right, so now I need to import toast here into this part of our app too, and I don't know why it's not importing, like auto importing. I'm actually tired of Visual Studio Code at this point. So let me just grab the import statement here. This is it. Sorry, I'll just copy that and then I'll slot that inside my register at the top. So Control V, and I think I even imported something that I'm not using, so I think that was a mistake. Yeah, so let's come down here and continue. So like, this is the first thing we want to check for. Now what if the password one, so this password field and the second password field, they don't match? Well, you also want to handle that. So I'll duplicate this one and then I'll just say that, look, if the password, which is the first one, is not equal to password 2, then I want to throw an error to the user. I want to say that, look, passwords do not match. So password do not match, and they must match. Okay, so that's one. Then another thing is, what if the password is less than 6 characters? So I think the password being less than 6 characters should come before the password 1 and password 2. So here I'll say that if the password dot length is less than 6 characters, then I want to say that password must be up to 6 characters. So let me see, password must be up to 6 characters. Yeah, then I also want to validate the email. So I'll just duplicate one of these, and I think I'll just leave it at the top here. So let me validate the email first. Now I'm going to create a function specially that will validate the email. Remember, we already did something like that in the back end in the model file. So before we save the model, we want to make sure that we want to validate it and make sure it's an email. So I would prefer to put that in my auth services. So here I'll just come back to my auth services and I will create a function here. Let me just create an arrow function. And I'll call that function validate email. Because I'm going to use it somewhere else, let's export it so we don't forget. So validate email is going to take an email. So I'm adding the email parameter. Then I will just return. So return, and here we'll say email dot match. Remember, when we did it in the back end, we use Redux, so we're going to use Redux as well. Email dot match, and our Redux jargons is going to enter here, this parenthesis. Now I'm definitely not going to write it from my head. I'll just go back to the back end, which is the user model, and then I'll just copy that validation that we used here. So this particular one, yeah, up till this end, I'll just copy everything. I'll copy it, and then I'll just head over to my auth services and slot that in. So this is how we're going to validate the email. and then you can just go ahead and close it, although it's not necessary, but that's it. So I'll close my model because I don't want to use it anymore, and then I'll save this file. So now I can now, because I exported this file here, we're getting an error here. Let me see. And we're not using the is loading yet. Okay, so it's because we have not started using the is loading, that's why we're getting this error. I just wanted to be sure. So let's come down here. Aha, so I'll go back to my register, and then I'll use that validate email function. That's what we saved it as, yeah, validate email. So I'll just grab it and then come back to register, and here I'll say that if not validate email, so if the email is not validated, and remember it needs to have an argument, which is the email you want to validate. So email, let's import it, by the way. Aha, so I'll import it from auth services. So here I'm saying that if the email is not validated, then I want to throw an error. So toast dot, I'll say please enter a valid email. Please enter a valid email. Simple as that. Great. So now let's, aha, so we've done reasonable amount of validation in the front end. Let's make some progress by trying to register the user, given that all of these validations have been, done. So first off, I'll take all the user data. I'll take all the information about the user from the form and put it inside this object that I'm going to call user data. Okay, I'll set that to be an object. So we're going to have the name, the email, and the password. And this is ESC syntax, where if the name and the property of the object is the same, then you can just skip and just write it once. All right, so now we have the user data. Next, we're going to do a try catch block to try and register the user. So first off, I'll say try catch, yeah. Now before I attempt to register this user, I want to set its loading to true. That's the first thing I want to do. So here I will come here, and then I'll say set is loading. I'll set that to true. Okay, then inside here now is where I will now make an attempt to register the user. Remember, we have already created a function in our auth services that is going to register the user. So we're just going to point to this function and give it what it needs, which is the user data. So I'll come back here, and here I'll say const data. I'll assign it to a variable, and then I'll say await register user, and see I'm already importing it from auth services. So I'll hit enter, and then this needs to have an argument, which is this user data we've created here. So here I'll just say user data. All right, and I'm getting this red mark here because we did not make this function asynchronous. So if you remember this register function, we need to make it asynchronous. So just type async in front of it, and that will just get rid of that red mark. So if you come down here, you will see that we now have the red mark has disappeared. So we can now use await inside here. Now when we've tried to register the user, remember we're expecting to get a data, which is the information about that user, and that will be stored inside this data object. So you know what I'm going to do? I'll just log that data to the console so that we can do this thing step by step. So log the data to the console, and then that's all. So what if there's an error? Well, of course, here we're also going to set its loading to false. So after you've gotten the data back, make sure you turn off loading. So set its loading to false. Then here I will also set its loading to false. If there's an error, you want to stop loading, set its loading to false, and then I'll just log the error to the console. So let's just log console.log, and I'll just say error.message. Okay, now before we test, let's just make sure that everything we wrote in our auth services is correct. So there's something I'm noticing here, and it's in this message area. We did error.response, and then we said and operator error.response or data. So here I forgot to make it double. that was a typographical error anyway. So that's about it for this one. And before we actually fire off this response, we need to do something in the back end. Remember, in the back end, if you go to server.js, you will notice that one of the things we installed was CORS, and we said that it helps us to resolve conflicts when we are making a request from the back end to the front end. Okay, so now this CORS here, we actually need to give it some properties. Being that we are sending credentials from the back end to the front end, we need to specify and tell CORS exactly what we want it to do. So I'll open an object here, and inside that object, I'm going to create an origin property, which is going to, in this case, be an array. In this origin, I'm going to specify the URL that I'm going to be making my request from to the back end. So remember, in our own is HTTP and then HTTP colon and then / localhost 3000. That's our front end URL. So here I'll just say localhost port 3000. But also when we deploy our application, I already have an idea of the URL I'm going to use. It's going to be pinvent app. So you know what, I'll just grab the proposed front end URL, because while I'm recording now, I've not created the front end. So I've not deployed the front end, but I know that it's going to be pinvent-app then .vercel.app. So that's it for the origin. Then also we're now going to set another property, and that is credentials, and I'm going to set that to true to enable exchange of credentials or sending the credentials from the back end to the front end. So this is very important when you want to make a request and you want to exchange credentials. If I was not exchanging credentials, just leaving the CORS blank would still work fine. So anyway, let's go ahead and save, and then I'm just going to, is there any other thing I need to do? Okay, I don't think I've saved this file, so let me save this file. Okay, great. So now we're going to come here and test this. I would open this guy up and I'll open this guy up, and then I'll just do my F12 to open my console.log. Now let's just change this a little bit. So I'll just register maybe Donald, and then here I'll just say donald@gmail.com to keep things simple. So here, of course, let me just try and register. So check our validation. Passwords must be up to 6 characters. So our validation is working correctly and fine. Anyway, let me just make it user 123, and then I'm also going to make this user 123. And if, for example, we don't make this complete, the second password, you'll see we get error. Passwords do not match. So it has not even fired the request to the back end yet. It's in the front end that we are validating. Anyway, let me complete it and make it 3, and then let's test this out. So I'll click on register, and fingers crossed. So you see, when I click on register here in our line 50, you see that we have this data returned to us in our register, and it gives us the bio, the email, the name, and everything that we returned from the back end, and even the token. So you see we have the token here. So that's about it for how we can register a user. And to confirm that we actually register this user, I'll need to go to the cloud database just to show you that, oh, this user has indeed been registered. If you refresh the cloud database, you would see that we now have an extra user. So this is pinvent-app.users, and then I'm just going to come down here like this and then scroll to the bottom. So you see we now have Donald and donald@gmail.com, which we just created. The password is encrypted, everything is working fine. So that's about it for how we can register a user. In the next video, we're now going to see do some other things around this area.